I want to welcome you here, and I know we have some guests, and I just want to extend some. If you're a guest here today, would you just raise your hand? We want to give you a special thank you for being here. We are very excited to have you, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon. There are a few people that I do want to recognize, and I want you to get to know these people. If you have an opportunity, just have a conversation with them. That's the Board of Directors of Texas Alliance for Life. If you're a member of the Board of Directors of Texas Alliance for Life, would you stand so that we can recognize you and thank you? Also, we are very excited and happy to have with us today some elected officials, some candidates that we want to recognize. And today, I'm very happy to see here the newest appointee from Governor Abbott to the Texas Supreme Court, the Honorable Jimmy Blacklock. The Honorable Justice Jeff Brown from the Texas Supreme Court. The Honorable Phil Johnson, Texas Supreme Court. We also have with us the Republican County Chair from Bastrop County, the Honorable Jean Raley. Thank you for being here, Jean. And the Caldwell County Republican Chair, I don't know if she's in the room, but Kathy Hagler, there you are. Hi, Kathy. We also have a candidate here who's running for the Congressional District of 21. Susan Narvaez is here. Would you? Thank you, Susan, for being here. And a candidate for the Texas State Representative for District 52, Cynthia Flores. Thank you. Okay, we also have some staff here from very important offices. And I don't see Peter here, and he is with Peter Salas, who is with Congressman Flores' office. Perhaps he's busy, so we want to keep him in mind. But we also have from the governor's office, Ben Taylor. Very nice to have you here, Ben. Okay, well, let's get right into it. We have a great program for you today. So I am going to ask that you all welcome the Executive Director for Texas Alliance for Life. Where are you, Joe? There you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Davida. I also want to recognize Greg Seidenberger, County Commissioner, Precinct 1 from Guadalupe County. Well, I want to welcome everyone here. My name is Dr. Joe Poyman, and I am Executive Director of Texas Alliance for Life. If you're new to Texas Alliance for Life and you're a guest, welcome to our first quarterly Leadership Circle Luncheon of 2018. We'll do next one in April and then August. My staff, I want to recognize my staff. Lance Peterson, our Director of Financial Development. Melissa Duncan, our Director of Communications. Anita Bray, Administrative Assistant. And she's several who are not here. Jenny Andrews, Public Policy Analyst. Jenny, I trust you're watching this online. It is on Facebook. But she's got the flu, so we don't want her here. Deirdre Cooper, also Public Policy Analyst, and she's working from her home with a whole bunch of small kids. And Solomon Schroeder, our database assistant. We have had a very eventful fall and winter. We spent a great deal of time giving credit to Governor Greg Abbott and the pro-life leadership of the legislature, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and House Speaker Joe Strauss for the sensational successes of 2017. We have a handout on the table with 3 pages of accomplishment, and it's also on our website, texasallianceforlife.org. I've never seen anything like this in Texas, and I have been lobbying for 30 years. I think we have to give them a great round of applause. All of these accomplishments will continue to make Texas a national leader in protecting the most vulnerable among us. Mothers and unborn babies, people at the end of life, and victims of forced abortions. We're recognizing a number of the legislators with our Courageous Defense of Life Awards and plan to travel to various districts across the state to present those awards. So watch our Facebook pages and emails. We'll keep you updated on that. Later today, we're releasing our legislative scorecard. First to the media, and then to all of you. And you will know how your state representative and senators actually voted on the House and Senate floors on these numerous issues. Wasn't our October dinner absolutely wonderful? We had more than 1,300 people in attendance, among our largest dinner ever. Ann McElhaney, author of the book Gosnell and producer of the upcoming movie by the same name, Gosnell. We got to know her a little bit, but listening to her speech just really brought home for me, and I think all of us, a really poignant message. When government turns a blind eye and fails to regulate abortion facilities, and that's exactly what happened in the state of Pennsylvania, the result is horror compounded on the tragedy of each and every one of those abortions that occur in those facilities. We cannot let that happen here in Texas. Now, 7 years ago, if I stood here 7 years ago, there were 46 abortion facilities in Texas. Today, there's 21. Now, yes, I know you agree with me. That's 21 too many. But until they close, and they will, but until they close, we must assure that those abortion facilities and their staff and their doctors abide by each and every safety regulation that the legislature has on the books. And that is our solemn moral obligation. Our next dinner, mark your calendars, will be on Saturday, October 20th here in Austin. And already think about inviting guests to your tables, because we need you to help us spread the message of life to new people. And so your guests at your table are absolutely critical to that mission. And we also want to invite new people to our leadership circle. One of the bills that passed, Senate Bill 8, bans inhumane disposition of the bodies of those babies who die from abortion. It just merely requires cremation or burial, and according to the abortion industry, the sky will fall if that's enforced. So already, the abortion providers ran to the federal courts here in Austin, filed a lawsuit led by Whole Women's Health, a national abortion chain based here in Austin, attacking that law in federal court here in Austin. And in Austin, in federal court, unfortunately, it's easy to find a sympathetic ear. The federal court issued a preliminary injunction preventing enforcement while the lawsuit goes on. So that means that the abortion facilities may continue to use their current methods of handling the remains of those babies. Grinding and flushing the babies down a municipal sewer system. Putting them in a landfill after incineration. That's what goes on. Now that lawsuit's going to last many months. So I'm very grateful, and I want to call him out by name, to our General Counsel, Christopher Maska, who explains all of this to me, what these maneuvers really mean, and then we can keep you and the pro-life public of Texas informed. Now, I could not, and I'm sure you agree with me, could not have been more proud of our governor, Greg Abbott, who gave a beautiful speech Saturday at the Texas Rally for Life. Am I right? He is truly a great pro-life leader and statesman. By the way, we think the crowd was our largest yet, with DPS estimating more than 5,000 people, and those were from all across the state. I mean, we had buses from Midland and Houston and 5 buses from Corpus Christi and Dallas and, all over the place. So that was just such a great day. And as the governor said, I think, paraphrasing, yes, of course, God shines down on the Texas Rally for Life, and the rain stopped and the clouds actually scattered, and we had a little bit of blue, but no rain during the rally. So that was marvelous. By the way, I learned that for more than 5,000 people to march, it takes at least a half hour for them to come and gather onto by the steps of the Capitol. It's getting really big. Next year, how about 10,000? The March primary election is just around the corner. That's March 6th, Tuesday, March 6th is the primary election, and early voting beginning on February 20th. Some of you may have mail-in ballots. That starts very soon. Watch for our pro-life voter guide on our website, texasallianceforlife.org, or just go to prolifevoterguide.org. Now, people in Michigan and California, they might be surprised to know that Pro-Life Voter Guide brings them to Texas, and but that won't help them voting there. But in Texas, anywhere in Texas, you go to that website, prolifevoterguide.org, and you can type in your address. If you want to join our mailing list, great. If not, that's fine. But you can. We will build for you a list of endorsed candidates, and these are solid, strategic, pro-life people. It will build for people whom you can vote for that will be on your ballot and in the order that they appear. You can print that out, and by law, you can take that with you into your polling place. And we'll also provide a link so you know where to vote, early voting, and election day. So really, we just make pro-life voting easy. And I think the effect is really there. We had a sensational success rate last primary election with more than 70% of our endorsed candidates in contested races succeeded all over the state. So that was marvelous. You Leadership Circle members who are designating Texas Alliance for Life PAC is where your donations go. Thank you. That's where it really pays off. And I can tell you, we do a marvelous job of getting grassroots to lobby the legislature. And we do a marvelous job, my lobby team, of lobbying them, but there's no substitute for having the right women and men in public office at the right time. And that's what we're assuring that happens. We so appreciate you members of our Leadership Circle. Your one-time gifts, your monthly donations, especially to our lobby fund. I know I've just mentioned the elections, but our lobby fund is important because it will be 2019 when the legislature next convenes. Your phone calls, your emails, it's just so encouraging, and it really makes our critical work very possible. And we thank you for bringing guests for the reasons I said. We want to share a message. And we'll hope you folks who are here for the first time or the second time, if you're guests, I want to encourage you to really consider joining our Leadership Circle, which you can do by filling out the cards at the table or go to our website, texasallianceforlife.org. That is the fuel for our rocket to get us off the pad and into orbit. Did you know I used to be an aerospace engineer? So thank you all so very, very much. I recently come to know a great friend of our movement, one of the many who was formerly convinced that Planned Parenthood's vision for the education of our youth regarding sexual activity and birth control was the best way to help them. We know that Planned Parenthood's sex education programs are really a way to market Planned Parenthood's birth control products. And when birth control fails, as it often does, did you know that half of the women in the abortion facility waiting rooms are on birth control, especially teens? When birth control fails, and it often does, to market to those unfortunate women the product that they really sell, abortion, Planned Parenthood's abortions, especially to our very young girls. Now she is squarely on our side, and we appreciate her so very, very much. Please help me welcome Monica Klein.
Thank you for having me here today, and I also want to thank many people who've actually helped me be here. Coming out of this industry in sex education was not an easy thing. When God helped me to realize what exactly I was involved in, it was a big shock to me, as you can imagine. My eyes were opened, but I have a lot of people that have come alongside me. Debbie Simmons is one of my great friends that has helped me through this. And then there were none with Meg and Abby Johnson who have, I said, well, they invited me to a retreat. And I'm like, well, I didn't do abortions. They're like, that's okay, come on over. And that was a big help to get some healing at those retreats as well. Because this comprehensive sex education or risk reduction education is truly pornographic. And there's a lot of healing that needs to be done for the people who have received that, a lot of unlearning, and as well as the individuals who work in that field and are coming out of it as well. I also want to thank Corey Tabor because he actually paid for my way to go to the sexual risk avoidance training with Ascend. So I want to thank you for that as well and helping me get here. I only have a short time with y'all today, and so I'll try to get to the meat of my experience in comprehensive sex education and tell you how I even got there. I'm originally from Brownsville, Texas, a very mostly Hispanic population that lives in Brownsville. And I came to the University of Texas in 1991, where I graduated with a bachelor's in psychology. During that time, I was asked to volunteer at an organization, and I decided to choose an organization called Algo Informicida in Austin, Texas. I believe they might still exist. And I did that because I had an uncle who identified as gay, and I never met him until the 80s when he came to visit us because he was dying because he had contracted the HIV virus. So I decided to join and volunteer the Austin Latina Gay Organization, who received funding to provide case management to people living with HIV, in particular people of color, and they also did prevention education. And I thought, well, if I get myself involved with this organization, I'll understand what my uncle went through and why he couldn't be with us in the Rio Grande Valley. So what I discovered was public health education, and it was risk reduction education. At first, I was uncomfortable with it, and I thought, well, you know, can't we just tell people to avoid some of this information? But I was told over and over again, no, this is the way they can do it safer. Because you see, risk avoidance education, or risk reduction education is about relativism. It's about do not judge the individual for what they're doing. For example, when I was being taught how to reach out to teenagers, I was told to go to Planned Parenthood, which was right across the street. And at the time, the head of their education department was Dottie Curry. And she was a person from the community. She lived in the community and she educated in the community. And she began to tell me about the teenage problem with pregnancy and some of the horror stories of girls coming into the clinic with all forms of things that I really don't want to repeat, but shocked about what these girls were coming in with, not just diseases, but even objects and such in their bodies. And I said, you've convinced me. You need to tell me, how do I teach them not to have sex? And she said, no, dear. And she patted me on the knee and she said, we're not going to teach them not to have sex. We're going to teach them how to do it safer. We're going to meet them where they're at, and we're just going to teach them how to do it safer. And safer for them is condoms and lubrication. But they also talk about behavior change. And they say, well, a lot of people don't want to use condoms and lubrication because it doesn't feel good, or it doesn't, whatever the reasons are. So part of comprehensive sex education and risk reduction is to also teach them how pleasurable it is to use these types of things, condoms and lubrication. And it also means that we need to role play different ways that you can talk to your partner and convince them to use condoms and lubrication. And we're also taught that when we see a sea of people and teenagers, assume that they're doing everything. Don't ask them what they're doing, just assume that they're already doing it, which would include vaginal, anal, and oral sex. So we are to speak candidly to those teenagers about all forms of sex and how condoms and lubrication can help them, giving them a false message that they're going to be protected. I wasn't comfortable with doing this, and so, but I was being taught by my leaders in the community, these experts at Planned Parenthood, that this was the only way, that there was no way that we could convince people not to have sex. There was no way we were going to convince children and adults not to have sex. So we just have to give them the resources, even if their parents don't want them to have it. Because what they told me is parents are a barrier to service. Once the parents know that this is happening, we'll never see them in the clinic again. So we need to let them know that it's safe to come here. So as I was being invited into different schools around East Austin mostly to talk about this with teenagers, I was literally, and this was back in the 90s, I was sneaked into the school. And the teachers would just wink at me and walk away, allowing me to say what I needed to say to the teenagers. So as I was speaking one day at an alternative school in East Austin, an alternative school means it's a school where, and let me also clarify if you don't know, in our area, the 613 or 623, I don't remember anymore, it was so long ago, East Austin was also primarily a people of color area. And so that's what we were always calling it. Our outreach was to people of color of childbearing age, men who have sex with men, as well as the women. So I was brought into this alternative school where the children were high-risk youth, and they had been kicked out of many other schools. And so this was their last alternative, was to be at this school. And I was going to teach 12 and 13-year-old boys and girls about sex. And we had on the board written anal sex, vaginal sex, and oral sex. And the conversation began about what bodily fluids have HIV or STDs in them, other STDs. Then I got a question from a young girl, a 13-year-old girl, and she asked me, how do I provide oral sex? I'm going to clean up the language a little bit. How do I provide oral sex without gagging? And it took me back. I couldn't believe what this little girl was telling me or asking of me. I wasn't comfortable with it. And I said, can you repeat what you just asked? And she asked it again. She said, I do this, but I get this reaction, and I just want you to teach me how to do it better. And I said, well, I think what I hear you saying is that this isn't something that you enjoy doing. She said, no, I don't. So if you teach me to do it better, then maybe I might enjoy it. And I said, well, have you ever considered not doing it at all? If it's not something you enjoy, have you considered just not doing it? And all the kids just turned around in their seats. Now, these are high-risk kids. So if you can imagine, they're teenagers, so they're already rowdy anyway. And they turn around and they look at me, and they're not mad. And Planned Parenthood always taught me that if I were to say something like that, obviously I'm judging them, so they're going to be upset, they're going to be closed off. But these kids didn't look closed off. They just looked at me, and all of a sudden they looked innocent. And I said, guys, do you realize you don't have to do any of this on the board? You don't have to have vaginal sex, anal sex, or oral sex. Have you ever considered that? And you know what the response was? No one's ever told us that. This education really does tell children to have sex. This is coming from the mouth of the youths. They're trusting us. They're trusting their teachers. They're trusting the clinics. They're trusting the adults to teach them. And if you tell them that this is the way of the world and this is the expectation, then that's what they're going to do. So then we didn't talk about prevention anymore. They started talking about, well, how do we stop having sex? One girl said, but I already started. I can't just stop now. I said, yeah, you can. And they were so calm, and they started talking about how they could support each other in deciding not to have sex. These are kids in an alternative school. They've been kicked out. I'm talking about kids that are just really a little out of control. All of a sudden, I had their attention. They really wanted to not have sex. I didn't have to tell them not to. I just suggested it. And they welcomed it, and they talked to each other about, hey, we don't really expect, the guys were like, we don't really expect that. We could just go watch a movie, or we could just go hang out. We could take a walk around the park. I mean, it was amazing what I was hearing. I wasn't suggesting that. They were suggesting it. I spent 2 years volunteering for Planned Parenthood's Nobody's Fool in Waco, Texas. Nobody's Fool is a very large conference that was organized by Planned Parenthood. And they had it in a huge conference, a convention center in Waco. And we had kids coming into middle school all the way to high school. And it was all going to teach them about risk reduction, using condoms, using lubrication, and how to negotiate the safer sex. They were all sectioned off per age, and we were teaching the girls that were between 12 and 13 years of age. In that room where we had them, we had 3 teachers. One was going to teach them about puberty, their bodies. Another one was going to teach them about STDs, show them a video of actually teenagers who were, the opening scene is 2 teenagers in bed. You can tell they just finished having sex, and the rest of the video is about, oh, I got a disease, now I have to tell people, now I have to go to a clinic. And so the whole video is just about having sex. And then I chose to talk about healthy relationships. That first year, I left there convicted. I was so angry. I did not like what the kids were being taught. It did not settle well with me, and I was still invited to come back the next year. And I thought, I'm never going to go there again. But then I thought, you know what, this time I'm going to do it my way. And so I had the girls in my group, and I said, I'm going to do relationships again. We're going to talk about that again and their futures. So I had the girls in my little group, and the other teachers were over to the side talking to their groups. And I started asking them, hey girls, so what do you want in life? What do you guys, tell me about your dreams. What do you want to be? And so I had volleyball player, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a teacher, and these are just 12, 13-year-old girls, and they're just excited about it. Okay, great, that's great. Tell me about your best friend. Think about someone who you just trust, has your back, no matter what you do, they're always there for you. Think about what is it about them that makes you feel that way and so safe about them. And so they started mentioning all the things that make them feel safe with this person, that they're honest and they always take care of them. And they're just going on and on about it. I'm like, okay, that's really good. I said, well, what about in dating relationships? Are y'all been talking about dating? And they started snickering. And I said, well, what should he look like? What should that guy look like? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, do you think that maybe he could be a lot like your best friend or that person that you trust? That maybe he respects you? And they're like, yeah, I could have him trust. Yeah, that would be good. It's like, yeah, so maybe the person you date is someone who admires you, respects you, protects you. Yeah. So they started thinking about that. I said, well, let's go back to your dreams then. Let's talk about that a little bit. So what would keep you from being that nurse or that volleyball player and all the things that y'all mentioned? And in the context of where we were, they said, well, being in an abusive relationship or getting pregnant. I'm like, yeah. I said, so what do you guys think you should do? Well, make sure we choose, the partners wisely, stay with your friends, or maybe don't date so quickly. I mean, they were coming up with all these answers themselves. I'm like, okay. And then one of them said, don't have sex? I said, maybe, but yeah, what about that? Well, one girl stood up and put her hands on her hip. She said, wait a minute. Do you want us to have sex or not? Of course, I knew the rest of the teachers were in the room with me, and I leaned in. I said, if it's up to me, if it were just up to me, I would say no. I want you to wait, and I want you to be that volleyball player, and I want you to be a nurse, and I want you to be a teacher, and I want you to have a healthy marriage. That's what I want for you. What I saw in those girls when I said that was relief. They relaxed. Their parents took them to this conference. They were driven there. They were dropped off there. And the girls, and these were girls that were just about to go into middle school, so I'm going to assume that they may not have gotten any education in the school yet. They already knew that they were coming into a conference that was going to teach them how to have sex. And when I started doing a presentation and getting them to answer these questions on their own, and they were getting the idea that maybe they shouldn't have sex, they knew that, hey, that doesn't jive with why we're here. They're smart. There's an organization, a liberal organization that loves Planned Parenthood, the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy. And they do a lot of research. They do a lot of polls among the teenagers. If you go to their website, you'll get an idea of what they teach. But one of the polls that they had was that teenagers reported that the person who would influence them most in their decision about having sex were parents. They said it themselves. It wasn't the teacher, it wasn't the clinic, it wasn't the nurse, it wasn't the expert, it was parents. One of my goals is to not only expose the truth of all of this and what the lies are, but to also teach parents that they need to talk to their children about these topics, and not about the graphic things, but just your expectations. When I got out of this field, I started wondering, why did I fall for this? Why did I spent 10 years working in HIV prevention, HIV case management, and then as a family planning training manager for all of Texas and New Mexico. And I thought, how did I not know that this wasn't right? Why did I allow them to mold me this way? My parents are married, they didn't get divorced. I came from a good family. Like, why did I do that? And I realized there was something that maybe, and I'm not blaming my parents, but they didn't talk to me about sex. They kind of, a roundabout way, said, "Oh, did you hear about, Consuela? She's got a baby now," and they were hoping that I would kind of listen to that and get the idea that, to avoid that, or she should have taken care of herself. What does that mean? But they never talked to me about it. I never had my dad look at me and say, "This is what I want for you because I admire you. I think you're beautiful. I want these things for you." I think that would have made a big difference for me. I had an older cousin that I really admired, and he once said, "You know what, I think I'm going to live with someone instead of getting married, just to try it out first." That stayed in my mind. Those messages stayed in my mind. It's important that parents speak to their children. And one of the things I did with my son is I was always, even at a young age, anything that was important to him was important to me. And this is what I teach my stepdaughters when they've asked me about their kids and how to raise them. If your child comes up to you and wants to talk to you for an hour about a pencil that they received from their teacher as a prize or something at school, you stop and you listen to that. And I did that because I knew that when he became a teenager, he would not want to speak to me. But if he knew, if I had this habit that mom always listens and mom thinks I'm important and everything I think is important to her, then I knew that as a teenager, he would come to me and talk to me. And guess what? He did. He's 18 years old now. And I can tell at 18 that, there's some things he probably doesn't tell me, and that's okay. He's an adult. Things are a little different. But boy, that kid has told me so much, which is why my stepdaughters ask me, "How did you raise your son?" Because he's a great kid. My own mother says, "How did you learn to do this?" Because y'all are so close. Because parents, we need to put our phones down. Even if you're tired. I was a single mom for 9 years. You have to stop and sacrifice as parents and be there for your kids. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do that, how I'm going to teach it, how I'm going to help change the culture, but that's one of my goals, and I hope you'll join me in that. Another important point, though, about Planned Parenthood that I want to emphasize and risk reduction education is that they truly believe that our teenagers have an insatiable appetite for sex. They don't think there's any way that you can stop it. And so that's why they need to continue giving your children condoms and lubrication and access to abortion. And they don't believe that your opinions and that your values for your children are important because they know better. And because you're old-fashioned. And like they've always said to me, parents are a barrier to service. So when a child goes into a Planned Parenthood, they can give a different name. They can give a friend's phone number. They're encouraged to do anything possible to keep secrets from their parents. And what do we teach our children when they're young? Secrets are not good. If there's an adult who tells you to keep a secret from your parents, that's a red flag. But yet that's what Planned Parenthood does. And they do it, and I think some of those people really think that they're helping. They do. Because they're, well, mom is going to get really mad. And then she won't be able to come and get access to care. And then she's going to get pregnant. I mean, they really do believe that. But if you think about it, a lot of the ways that they teach the education how they groom the kids. One of the first exercises in this kind of education is to have them list all of the slang terms for sex and body parts. And it's uncomfortable, and they giggle, but they're still told to do it. That is breaking down inhibitions. It's very similar to grooming for child sexual abuse. Do they see it that way? Did I see it that way? No, we didn't. But I see it that way now, and I know you do too. It's really important that we let parents know what this education is really like, and that these organizations exist based on their secrets. A year before I left, I went to a human trafficking conference because I just wanted to. I knew it was an important topic. This was back in probably 2008 or so here in Austin. And I learned all about human trafficking and how to identify a victim of human trafficking. And my boss at the time at the organization called Center for Health Training, who had the Title X training grant, said, "Sure, go ahead, go do that." So I attended that conference. A year later, the Title X grant actually had as a key concept that we needed to identify, the clinicians needed to learn how to identify victims of human trafficking. So I was like, perfect, I went to a training. I'm going to teach that. So I went to Corpus Christi because Planned Parenthood always had enough money to pay for me to go and visit them and train them all on their own. So I was in Corpus Christi at a hotel in a big conference room teaching them about Title X requirements. And then I started talking about human trafficking. And I said, you know, when a teenager comes in or a young girl comes in and you just kind of get that feeling she's not really with her dad, or, you know, you just kind of have this feeling it's someone that, either someone who's trafficking her as a pimp or someone who's having sex with her, and, you know, then, and you know what I'm talking about is what I told them. I said, that is also considered human trafficking. Statutory rape, human trafficking. And it was a room about this big. And they all were just like, just kind of, no, shaking their heads. I said, well, you know, this young girl is vulnerable. She doesn't know how to tell you, you know, what's happening. You need to use your counseling skills to be able to get this information from her and protect her. They started giggling and dismissing what I was saying. I said, I don't understand this reaction. Can you tell me, you know, guys, this is real. This is human trafficking, you know. And a nurse raised her hand and she said, honey, if she's not sleeping with this guy this month, she'll be with another one next month. And they all said, yeah. They don't see our children as human anymore. They don't. And a common phrase was, don't ask, don't tell, like in the military for homosexuality. If you don't ask them, then you don't have to tell. And they love using that. If I don't ask the girl how old she is or who she's having sex with, then I don't have to tell. And they actually think they're doing this girl a favor. Our communities are at risk. These evidence-based interventions that they say are effective or based on evidence, they're not. They're based on self-report. I challenged them about that in the 90s when I went to a training on when the CDC first put out evidence-based interventions. I said, guys, what's the evidence for this? And they said, self-report. I said, seriously? That's it? Just because someone walked in and said, yeah, you taught me to use them and I've used them 3 out of 5 times, that's evidence-based? It wasn't until a couple of years ago that Ascend and the HHS actually admitted that these interventions are not working and that they're not scientifically sound. And that made me very angry because I was teaching that since the 90s in communities that are dying. And the CDC is actually telling us to use these evidence-based interventions and supporting it and defending it all these years while the people in our own community just on the other side of 35 are dying. If you look up the statistics for the CDC and the STD rates in 2016, those STD rates are still increasing. They have not declined. Our children are still at risk, mainly 15 to 24-year-olds and men who have sex with men. This education hasn't helped. It is meeting them where they're at, like Dottie Curry told me to do, but it's also to leave them there. Why is it that we've decided that when it comes to sex, that we just want to let people continue being in high-risk behaviors? We have other health models like smoking cessation. It's like, avoid it, don't do it. Don't do drugs. But when it comes to sex, it's, oh, put a condom on it. Statistics also show that children, young people who have sex early, are more likely not only to have diseases, get pregnant, they won't do as well in school, which has nothing to do with becoming pregnant, and also have higher rates of depression. Those children who have chosen to avoid sex have higher grades, are more likely to go into higher institutions of learning, and are healthier. You can look it up for yourself. It's not a secret. So why is it that we have all this evidence, but yet we continue to do this education? I don't know, but it's going to take people like you and organizations like Texas Alliance for Life to help stop it, because this kind of education is what's also leading to the abortions that we are fighting against. Abortion is always the only option for these organizations.
That's right.
When I asked them, when I started to question the education, and when I started to question innocently, I was like, guys, have you noticed that we really do promote abortion? They're like, what are you talking about? I said, no, really. We really do. We don't have adoption people at our conferences. We don't ever talk about abstinence except for the one sentence that says it's the only 100% way to avoid pregnancy and STDs. And after that, we just talk about sex. Have you ever noticed that we really promote abortion? And I'm like, Monica, what are you talking about? They were realizing that I was changing. And I was realizing what was really happening. I was told by my supervisor before I left, if you're not pro-choice, you don't belong here. And this was an organization that was funded to provide training for Title X. I don't know how to fix it, but I know I can't do it all on my own, just like Joe can't do it all on his own. We need your help. One of the things that movement I want to start is that it takes a family. It takes a family to raise children. It takes a family to build healthy communities, and it takes a family to form a great nation. And that's what we need to focus on. We need to clean up our schools. We need to hold our clinicians accountable. We need to set up proper legislation. But even with legislation, we need to hold each other accountable. And we need to find a way to change the culture through the families. And we know that the other side knows this because they are putting these curriculums starting pre-K. They know that if they get to our children, that they're going to change the culture. And they're doing it. So we can't be passive, and we can't just be meeting together. We need to go out into the community and make a difference, however you can. One of the things that has come to my attention as well is that people like me, you either like me right now or you still hate me because of what I used to do. But I want to read something to you that as I was preparing for this, I thought, God, what do you need me to say? And this is in Jonah. But God said to Jonah, do you have a right to be angry about the vine? I do, he said. I am angry enough to die. If you remember, Jonah was asked to go to Nineveh to show God's grace because they were a lost people. And Jonah didn't want to do it. He was angry. He didn't want them to have grace. He wanted punishment for them. But the Lord said, you have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who could not tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city? Organizations like And Then There Were None, and many of you know that praying for these educators, praying for the clinicians is important. I don't know who prayed for me, but someone prayed for me and helped me get out of this. And God convicted me and helped me to see, because all of the proof was right there, but I couldn't see it. I didn't know my left hand from my right. Grace and compassion does not mean that we leave people where they're at. Grace and compassion founded in truth leads us to great paths and it's going to take courage, and it's going to take work. I'd like to open this up for any questions that you may have. I'm sure you're curious. Yes?
Monica, I'm so encouraged by your story, and you're going to be a beautiful sword in the hand of God. Thanks be to God.
Thank you.
For the conversion. I had a friend that told me at the Pro-Life March that she's a teacher in Austin, and she had indicated that they're coming out with a new program for sex education, not telling the parents about this new program. It was being presented to the teachers, and one teacher stood up and said, "I cannot teach this to my children." And apparently it has been put on a back burner. What do we do in situations like that as a community to go to the school systems to get this education changed?
That's a great question, and my friend Debbie Simmons has a great answer for that. And I'll just share.
Just repeat the question.
Oh, okay. So she's mentioning that she met a teacher in Austin ISD who they've been presented with a curriculum that is going to teach, I'm assuming, comprehensive sex education or risk reduction. And she's asking, what can parents do, because they don't plan on letting parents know what this curriculum's about. Something that Debbie has taught me is that there's something called a shack. I don't know about it as well as Debbie does. You might want to ask her about it. Debbie, can you raise your hand? Yeah, you're going to have to talk to Debbie for sure. She's amazing. She's done a lot of research about this, and she actually helps, I hope this is right, but she does help people get active, parents active in their shack. Every school or every school district. Every school district has a shack that parents need to be involved in, and they're the ones that are making decisions and voting on whether yay or nay on these curriculums. And the more people, more parents who believe as we do are involved in that shack, the better. We need to get in leadership positions. It's not enough to just go to the school and complain. We need to be in leadership positions. This is the other reason why I believe it takes a family, because we need to raise our children to have that same kind of courage, because they will be our leaders in the future. So look up SHAC. It's an acronym for School Health
Advisory.
Student Health Advisory Committee Council. Yeah, and that's probably the first step in getting involved. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, I would just say that I went through all this in Chicago with my own two older kids, and they're all now in their 40s, you know, and I was the voice of one, speaking out, going to the school, and I feel strongly people put their children in the public school, then you need to be on it. And I did have my children removed from sex education. I did insist on getting to see what they were telling and going to teach my children. And it's so true what you said about the wearing down. I had a college course like that, and it was to wear down sensitivities and everything else. But you know, if you got your kids out in the schools, you have a job to reprogram your child and spend the time at home that it takes to put them on the right path. Because just to blindly throw our kids into that situation is really, really remiss on our part as parents.
Our children really trust us, and they trust their teachers. And it's really important that as parents that we need to share that correct information with them and get the resources necessary to help them with that.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. You know, you're here for a reason, and that reason is Leadership Circle Luncheon. But there are no quinkydinks in life. That is a word, I think. because Monica's message was unbelievable. It's taken place right under our noses. And if you have the bandwidth and if you have the courage and if you have the strength to expand on what you're doing in your life, this would be a great mission to undertake. If you understand the three pillars of what Texas Alliance for Life does, which is lobbying, education, and compassionate alternatives for abortion, what you just experienced was our education. We go out of bounds of just the abortion issue, because what happens and what you just heard is that this leads to more abortions. And so, Monica, I thank you so much for the struggles that you've gone through, made you a stronger person, and impacted a lot of people. In fact, you could look around the room and see how many people you've impacted today. And hopefully some of you will pick up that standard and carry it forward. So I've got notes for about 4 hours here, so we can continue on. I want to welcome all the guests that are here today, and I kind of want to go over some of the things that Dr. Joe Poindman said, and I want to kind of thrill you a little bit. All right, so I'm not going to dance, but I did that last night at a soccer match. So the Texas Alliance for Life Leadership Circle was started in 2006. And you guys have heard me do this report at every single luncheon. And that we have roughly 250 members. And if you understand how membership in organizations go, you have people coming in and people going out because people die, they move, they go to Los Angeles, God forbid, and they go to other places, and they don't continue their membership, which is okay, because people have to make hard decisions on what to do in their lives. So we are pretty steady at 250. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to challenge each one of you within the next year to bring in one more person into the leadership circle. Just one person. If you bring in one person, we can expand this to 500 people. Now let me tell you the results since 2006. We have raised $3.2 million via the leadership circle. Wow. Now that may not seem like a whole lot to y'all, but when you're a nonprofit, it's really hard to raise money for nonprofits. Correct, Heather? So we're blessed. God has blessed us. And God has blessed us with you guys to help do what Joe and his legislative team do in the legislature to correct some of the wrongs that have been built into our laws. And I would encourage you, this is your homework assignment, to take this home. And if you don't have a copy of it, you can print it off of our website, texasallianceforlife.org. And this will tell you what we've done. All right, now I say we. That doesn't mean me. Joe won't let me in the legislature, okay? Joe, Chris Maska, DeVita, the rest of the legislator team, Terry Williams. But these are the accomplishments. And this is done in relationship with a lot of people in the legislature. But you need to understand what you've accomplished here, not us. What you've done because you showed up. You brought your checkbook and you followed through. Those are the three things that you've done. And God bless you for that. So to give you an example of how powerful you guys are, in this envelope is a brand new Leadership Circle member today. Just signed up today. All right? Now, why did that happen? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why it happened. Not because I'm so good looking, but because you're here and people see the impact of it. Okay? So for those guests, and you don't have to raise your hand because I will hunt you down. This explains what the leadership circle is. And again, I want to go back to one of our 3 pillars, which is education, which is what you got today. How many of you knew this was going on? Okay, so a fair amount of you. All right, how many of you, I shouldn't ask this question. I won't. How many of you want to do something about this issue? There you go. All right. So one of the first things I would suggest you do is get involved with the Texas Alliance for Life via the Leadership Circle, because it gives you an opportunity to experience issues like this. You know, we also have a great reputation in the legislature. So this is not on our actual bailiwick of our mission, but it's a subcategory of what our mission is. So with that said, I would just encourage all of our guests or anybody who's not a Leadership Circle member to either see me or Lance. Where's Lance? Lance, the tall guy over there. We'll talk to you about signing up for a Leadership Circle membership. And on your table is a little brochure, so I don't go through the numbers. The next thing I want to talk to you about is we have coming up in June, on June 9th, is our walk. And Lance, if you come up here, and it's on June 9th. And I want to ask you if you would go to your pastors in your churches and tell them that you would like your church to become part of the Texas Alliance for Life walk. Now, let me just kind of tell you that one of the problems you're going to have is that most pastors probably think that we're after money, and we're not. The walk is not done it is done to raise money, but not from each individual church. The walk is done to have the walkers raise money. So you can tell your pastor with confidence that we're not here to take any of the money that they get in their coffers. That all we want is walkers to walk, and that those walkers will raise their own money from friends, associates, and so forth. And so we want to come up alongside that church, that pastor, and provide him a couple of different things. One, how we do our walk. And number 2, the educational part of what we represent. That educational part is really interesting because that sitting down here is Joe Poindman and Davida and Terry Williams and Chris Maska, who have a wealth of information and a wealth of asset to provide assistance with those pastors in talking about the life issue, abortion issue, and so forth. So before I bring Lance up here, let me just talk to you about something that happened to me. And some of you have heard this story, but down the street from me, when I lived in North Austin, was a gentleman, part of the Greatest Generation, and his name was Colonel Bob. Excuse me. Colonel Bob's no longer with us. But Colonel Bob threw B-24 Liberators out of North Africa into the Lefesti oil fields against the Nazis. They had 50% losses every time they took off. 50% of the planes didn't come back. And that's tragic. However, Bob said he would just look and count the number of days when his number was called. So he said the greatest day in my life besides marrying my wife was the day I looked out on my wingtip and I saw a P-38 Lightning. How many of you know what that is? It's a fighter aircraft, 2-engine. They went into that bombing run on the Lefesti oil fields, and they did not lose one airplane to German fighters that day. Amazing. I could tell you more stories about Bob. We don't have all day. So, but my point in that is that's a good story to remember when you go talk to your pastor, that all we want to do is come up alongside of the pastor and help him to understand what we do in our walk. Now, when we raise money for the walk, and we raised, what, 70,000 last year, and that money specifically goes to doing something very interesting, which is fighting some of these lawsuits that are being, the state's being attacked on. So that money goes partly to there. So when you help raise money for the walk, what you're doing is you're helping create a defense fund so that we can keep these laws in place and away from these liberal judges. All right. So the second part of it is 20%, a double tithe of all the money that we raise goes to the pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes around Central Texas and up in Harker Heights and all that stuff. So it's a great mission for you to get involved in, and I would encourage you to do that. And I'm going to ask Lance to come up here now.
Thanks, Dale. I'm not exactly the P-38 Lightning.
No, you're not.
Okay. Just want to clarify. Okay, the Walk for Life, June 9th, that's a Saturday. We have 5 locations now. Last year we expanded up into Harker Heights. We found a great, supported a couple of parishes up there, a great volunteer team with the McNews and the Hernandezes. So we thank you for helping us grow and take our pro-life message into Harker Heights and the Killeen area. It was wildly successful. Also the locations are here closer to home, North and South Austin, Cedar Park, as well as Georgetown. Now the nuts and bolts of the walk are finding people in your Bible study, finding people at the parish office, friends and neighbors. We've got a great supporter here. She goes to her bankers. Who would have thought that you could just walk into the bank and ask the bank for money? Well, usually it's they want your money and deposit it, and then they want to keep it. But she goes in and actually gets the bank to give her money. So there's all sorts of ways out there to have a successful walk for life. But it's grassroots. So again, talking to people in your Bible study. Maybe it's the director or the head of the women's ministry at your parish. Could be the Respect Life Committee. Could be the Knights of Columbus. But it's
Respect Knights.
Yeah, well, that's the combination. It's a new offshoot. But what we found is sometimes your pastor, your priest, they're supportive, but they're kind of committed with all the church's ministry. So if you go up at the grassroots level, kind of bottom up, so to speak, you might have the pastor's support, and in many cases we already do, but they're kind of busy with the day-to-day ministry of their flock. So you can come in, like I say, grassroots level to help us get into those friendships and relationships, again, at the kind of horizontal level versus up and down. So I want your help. I want you to help me. This little white form on the table is how to help us promote the walk. And if you can just fill that in, it could be just simply by putting in the name of the church or the parish secretary. It could be the name of the person who's at your director of your women's committee. We have a member here who's so helpful. She writes letters to the pastor herself, so that works. Then she can introduce me. So just help us at the grassroots support. We've got a website that will be set up. We also have good old-fashioned paper documents or paper forms. And the whole focus of the walk is I contact my friends, family, relatives, etc., and basically ask them for a donation. And our average walker raises over $400. Of course, nobody here, that's impressive. Nobody here is average, right? Well, hey, Kale, did you do an average walk?
I'm just average.
So nobody is here is average, but the people that aren't here, that are average, they raise over $400. And in comparison to other national organizations that, for example, let's just say March of Dimes or Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which are great charities, we raise a ton of money compared to some of those organizations' big walks. So you might have heard about Walk for Life before and you think, oh, that's cute, that's nice. It's really, really effective for us. It helps us build our overall membership as well, because there are walkers in this room who are now Leadership Circle members, and that's really helpful as well. So help us, call me, 512-477-1244. Or for those, no, never mind, I'll never stop there. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Lance. All right, we appreciate every one of you coming today, and we especially appreciate Monica delivering that wealth of knowledge to us. Our next Leadership Circle Luncheon will be in April. We have not set the date, but we will let you know via email as soon as we do that. And we so much appreciate who you are and what you do, and the fact that you're willing in this kind of environment in Central Texas to step out and be who you are. Be pro-life and be proactive. Thanks so much for coming.